What's up everyone? So this is an unplanned video, but I think it's great information. It's something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind with the car lately, and it's one of those, like, I just went out and I'm testing it right now, and it's interesting. It's really interesting to see this. All right, so a quick little backstory. 4 months ago maybe, I did a really hard rip on this car. I was out on the street cruising it, and after I did that rip, I happened to be driving back home. So as I'm coming back home, I start to notice my oil pressure gauge like dropping, but it wasn't like a significant all the way to zero. It's just, it started to get lower and lower at every stop I'd get to. So like when you're cruising, you want about 45 to 55 psi. Like that's healthy oil pressure. That's normal oil pressure when you're cruising. At idle, it's okay to see 20 to 25. Like that's fine. So I've always saw kind of 27, 28. Every time I'd come to a red light, it'd get to 22, 20, 18. And now I have the warning set to 12. I started go down to 15. I'm like, what's going on right now? Like, did I just start to spin a bearing? I don't know. So by the time I get home, I come to stop to back into my driveway. It's down to 0, and I killed the car right there. I'm like, what just happened? So I started back up. It's still at 0. I just like, well, I got to back it in. So I back it in. I'm trying to figure out like what's going on here. So now I'm thinking, like, I did a really hard pull. I don't know. You know what? I said maybe the oil washed down. So and it thinned out because I still kind of had like okay oil in there. I drained it. I put 1030 in it now. I kind of went a little thicker to try to increase my oil pressure. I did that. Didn't really change. And I honestly, you know, it's on. I kind of had it in the back of my head, like, you know, this winter I'll just rebuild the motor if this is the oil pressure I'm seeing. I've been beating it up hard for 2 years at the track. It is what it is. So one thing that kind of dawned on me, I'm like, well, I have had like 0 oil pressure every time I start it up now. I starts up with 0 oil pressure, and then it slowly increases to eventually, after letting it idle for 10 minutes, it gets up to the 20s. Then I take it out to drive. I come back to a stop, and it drops at like 8. So I'm like, well, if I really have 0 oil pressure, my dummy light should be coming on the dashboard, because I still have the OEM oil pressure sending unit on there. And I've never had that oil pressure light come on, the OEM one. So that makes me think like, yo, is this gauge bad? So I've been slacking. The car's been at the body shop. You guys know that. I finally got it back. I went to Harbor Freight. I picked up just a mechanical oil pressure tester kit, because I'm like, yo, what if it's not the motor? Because one, I've never seen any flakes in my oil. I've cut open my oil filter. I didn't see any flakes in there, and the dummy light's not coming on. Like, I should have heard knocking. I should have heard flakes if I have 0 oil pressure. So I'm hooking up the Harbor Freight oil pressure gauge onto it right now, and we're gonna check the because I have an AEM 0 to 150 oil pressure gauge, like the X series, the new one, and I installed it. Oh man, I think at the beginning of this year or last year, like, it's fairly new. So I'm gonna check the mechanical to the AEM one, and that's gonna tell us what's going on. In case anybody's wondering, this is the oil pressure kit that I bought, or the tester. So it comes with all the fittings right here. I used the one that is slightly bigger than the smallest one they have. I kind of already set it up on the car. You're definitely not going to see anything, but luckily, because I have the oil pressure, the K-tuned oil pressure block, or the K-tuned oil adapter block, which is where I have, you can see the gold sensor right here. This is the AEM one. The block is this whole thing. I was able to tie the Harbor Freight gauge. Let me see. Well, I have this right here. This is our gauge right here, and it ran. You can kind of see the bronze fitting right down there. You can see the OEM pressure sensor. So that's where that's ran. I had an open spot. I put it right there, and I just ran the gauge up to my windshield right here, so that way I can kind of monitor it. So we're gonna see these. I'm gonna see if I can do this by myself, so you guys can see what's going on. I'm gonna try to do this with one hand, because I need to hold the mechanical. That's annoying. I need to hold the mechanical gauge so it doesn't fall down on the windshield, because I need to be able to see it. So I'm going to put the camera down so that way we can do this all in real time. Start it up. The car has problems running. It needs to get retuned. I don't know what's going on with it. It doesn't like to stay running at first, so I'm going to have to give it some throttle or whatever. But even when I give it throttle, the AEM gauge never increases until it warms up. Whatever. So you're going to hear me struggling. It's going to be hard to turn on, but then I'm going to pick the camera up with my other free hand after I'm done cranking it. And we're going to go between both gauges. Let's try to do this. give me a second, guys. So let's try. Alright, so let me get you guys right here. You can see 4, right? I got 90 right here. It's the gauge. Look at that. 4 compared to mechanical, and this because the motor is surging between 80 and 90. So, all right, the motor's good. It's either the pressure, it's the switch on it's the gauge itself, or it's the sending unit on the gauge, right? So now we got a steady idle. That's our oil pressure on cold start. 85. That is great oil pressure. Not 4. There we go. It's not the motor. So the motor is still running healthy after 2+ years of beating on it. And not to mention another thing, I've been running the wrong oil in it this whole time. So, hey, I built a strong motor. I'm going to give myself credit right now. I built a solid motor because even with the wrong oil, 2 years of track beating, still running good. So that's what it is. I'm going to contact AEM. I'm not bashing them right now. I'm just curious as to why it went bad so quickly. It could be the sending unit or it could be the actual gauge. I've done some research. It could be either or. Not sure yet. Hopefully AEM can maybe give me some tips on how I could diagnose it a little more. Probably the sending unit, but who knows at this point. I just want to let you guys know, if you have an AEM X Series 0 to 150 oil pressure gauge and all of a sudden you're getting like very low oil pressure, but you have no flakes in your metal. You have no flakes in your metal. You have no flakes in your oil. If you're able to, you cut the oil filter open. You have nothing in there. And most importantly, your dummy light never came on. It's probably your gauge. Because that dummy light, your OEM dummy light, should come on if you reach. Definitely if you have 0 oil pressure. But if you're at like 10 or something, or 5, that thing should come on your dashboard and it should start flashing. So just a quick tip for you guys. I'm going to look into this. We'll figure it out. And I'll tell you guys what the fix is. Alright? I'll catch you in the next video. Stay motivated and keep making those streets louder.